In China, a terrible part of history could be about to repeat itself. In 1989, Chinese students led massive protests in Beijing, which threatened the power of the CCP. So Chinese government retaliated and attacked its own people using soldiers and tanks, resulting in the loss of thousands of innocent lives. Unfortunately, there are echoes of this happening again today. Chinese banks recently defrauded billions of dollars from its customers and froze access to their life savings that are most likely no longer there. Mass protests have erupted across the nation. And according to some reports, President Xi has already rolled in the tanks, ordering them to defend China's banks from the people. The situation is complex and shrouded in propaganda. But despite information, one thing is pretty certain. China's economy could be on the verge of total collapse. And if it falls, it could take many of us down with it as well. What's happening in China now has massive global implications that could result in Americans and Europeans losing trillions of dollars of their own bank deposits. The situation is so crazy right now that even YouTubers who have already covered this topic are reporting that the CCP is attacking their videos, likely using bots to leave negative comments and dislikes on the videos, possibly to censor this information getting out. To counteract this happening, I would really appreciate a quick like on this video now. With that said, here is what we know about the financial situation unfolding in China right now. In April this year, Chinese banks began quietly restricting access to customers' money. It began in Henan province, where people found it difficult to withdraw large sums from their accounts. They discovered they couldn't access their life savings and eventually none of their money at all. Word of this quickly began to spread throughout China. Viral posts on social media warned people banks were running out of money, which caused a frenzy across the country. This resulted in massive protests taking place against the nation's banks and the Chinese government. Protests that are still going on today, and reportedly what's caused the government to retaliate with tanks. Here's the thing, I can't even show you the footage of the tanks or most of the visuals from the protests simply because the people that I've shared this footage have had their videos removed for going against the terms of service. But with that aside, why did this crisis start in the first place? Well, it seems that it has everything to do with the banks mismanaging its customers' money. In an effort to acquire new customers, banks in Henan province began advertising online and offering customers extremely high interest rates on their deposits. Interest rates tied to investments the banks said were risk-free. But in the world of finance, almost nothing is ever risk-free. The banks also falsely advertised their products, leading Chinese citizens to believe that they were putting money into a normal savings account, which under Chinese law would be insured by the government. However, the savings were instead going into riskier financial investments that were uninsured. During the global health crisis, China's economy began to slow, which for the banks in Henan province meant their investments in business and real estate stopped giving them returns. Very soon, they could no longer deliver on the huge returns they promised customers and started to run out of money. And as they were also lying to customers about where their money was being invested, the government wouldn't insure the losses, resulting in thousands of Chinese citizens becoming bankrupt almost overnight. But of course, Hunan's banks didn't tell the people that they lost their life savings or that they were running out of money, but instead they did exactly what you'd expect them to do. They lied. Knowing they didn't have enough to cover withdrawals, banks blocked customers from accessing their money. Firstly, they claimed online services were going down for maintenance, meaning people couldn't access online banking. But this was all just a ploy, as months later, many of these banks' websites are still down for maintenance today. At ATMs, people also found they couldn't withdraw money, with machines declining all requests to produce cash, regardless of how much a customer had in their account. And if they tried to use an ATM too many times, the bank would just shut down their cards or accounts altogether, claiming evidence of fraudulent activity. While this was all happening, the CEO of Hunan's investment group responsible for the whole fiasco fled the country, according to reports, possibly to the United States, leaving customers to deal with the situation on their own. And with an estimated $6 billion shortfall, most of them will never get back. Now, as you can imagine, the people didn't really take this all too well, and this is when the protests started. The protests that are still happening today. Customers began storming banks in Henan, demanding their deposits. In an attempt to stop them, banks allegedly conspired with the Chinese government. They handed over the names of thousands of depositors involved in the protests. Government officials then allegedly changed the personal health status of these citizens, implying that they were high risk of being recently exposed to C19, effectively forcing them to stay in home quarantine. But despite these accusations against the government, protests have continued, and the anger of protesters has since spilled out into the rest of Chinese society. As word of the crisis spread, more normal Chinese people feared their banks would run out of cash as well, resulting in millions of people starting a bank run, trying to take out as much money as they could. This created a domino effect that spread across the country, and like wildfire, more banks started to run out of money. By June, most Chinese banks had put some kind of limit on customers' withdrawals, including in Shanghai, where every single bank has restricted their customers' access to money. Basically, China is in a financial storm right now, but it is at this point that the Chinese government stepped in to do what it does best, denying anything is wrong at all. The CCP has complete control over information in China. After the protests started, Chinese citizens found that they could no longer get accurate news about what was really happening because the CCP was blocking accounts that were trying to get this information out to the world. But this wouldn't be a problem in China.
စိန်နဂီမှာ 2D3D BDI Sport Game Master တော့တိုက်က9ပြစ်ကိန်းနဲ့ game ပေါင်း20ကျော်ကို9ရက်ကျမှစတင်ကစားလို့ရပါပြီ။ဘောလုံးနဲ့ကစားဖို့အတွက် BDI Sport ကိုအသစ်ထပ်မံတိုးချဲ့ထားပြီးတော့ 2D ကိုအစား80 3D အစား900ပတ်လက်10စားနဲ့ကန်ဆန်းလို့ရပါတယ်။အသေးသေးသိရှိလိုပါကစိန်နဂီရဲ့ official Facebook page မှာမြင်မြင်နိုင်တဲ့အပြင် Viber ဖုန်းနံပါတ်39964223ကိုလည်းဆက်သွယ်ဆောင်နဲ့မြင်မြင်နိုင်ပါတယ်။24နိုင်ငွေသွင်းငွေထုတ်ကိုဆောင်ရွက်ပေးနေတာကြောင့်စိန်နဂီ application ကနေ game တွေကိုဆော့ကစားပြီးအခုပဲငွေတွေကိုရယူလိုက်ပါ။
Okay, so now back to the video. And this is why the banking crisis in China got so bad so fast. China's banks work on a fractional reserve system. This means by law, banks are only required to keep a small percentage of customers' deposits on hand. The rest, they're allowed to lend out to others. In China, the fractional reserve rate is 11.25%, meaning banks only need to keep 11.25% of the money customers deposit with them in their accounts. And the remaining almost 90%, the banks can use to invest or loan to other customers so that they can charge them interest. This system can only function if everyone doesn't want to take their money out at the same time, but it also relies on trust. People need to believe that when they do want their money, the bank will have it. But when they start losing faith in that system, like what's happening in China, people panic and all try to withdraw at the same time. And because banks don't have enough money for everyone, the entire system crashes. Unfortunately, this system isn't exclusive to China. Fractional reserve banking is used in basically every country on earth. In the USA, Sri Lanka, Australia, Germany, and everywhere in between, meaning your bank also wouldn't have enough money if everyone tried to withdraw at the same time. So what's happening now in China could very possibly happen to us as well. Long story short, this is the main reason why Chinese banks are trying so hard to stop its customers from accessing their money. Because the scary truth is, the banks don't have all of it. Now, this whole situation is getting very close to collapsing China's economy completely, with some saying that it's only days away from complete failure. And of course, this would be terrible for China. But here's why it would also be very bad for the rest of us. Without the flow of money, a country can't function. So if China's banks collapse, the entire nation's economy will as well. But as the West is heavily invested in China's banks and property market, this would have severe consequences for us as well. And we're already seeing the first signs of what that might look like. Western investment firms like Fidelity, UBS, BlackRock, and Allianz have invested or loaned billions in China, loans that already aren't being paid back. But of course, these investment firms aren't loaning their own money to China. They're loaning their investors' money, which in reality is your money. Because these firms' biggest customers are the companies you entrust your money with, like your everyday bank, your pension fund, and your insurance company. You give them money to manage it or to help it grow, and in turn, they invest in companies like BlackRock. But if BlackRock doesn't get paid back by China, it can't pay back all its investors, meaning the flow of money back to you stops. So if the house of cards falls in China, trillions won't be paid back to foreign investors, and millions of people like you may also find the life savings they've entrusted to their bank in the US may have disappeared overnight. More than anything, I think this shows how connected the global financial system is, and that when you give your money to a bank, how little control you have of where that money actually ends up. Now, I'm not suggesting here that you go to a bank and pull all your money out, but at times like this, you might want to consider taking steps to ensure that not everything you have is tied to this system. I strongly believe in diversifying where I hold the value I earn to ensure it's not all tied up in the standard banking system. This is why I hold a percentage of my cash in crypto and commodities, and why I use a portion of my monthly income to buy gold and silver as well. Some things you might consider for yourself. But whatever you do, just remember this, that most of the money that you give to your bank isn't really there at all, because the law allows them to loan most of it out for profit, which means right now your money could be invested in destructive tar sand oil fields in Canada, or maybe supporting the destruction of Indonesian rainforest to produce palm oil. It could be providing funding to support Australian weapons contracts, and it might even have made its way to banks in China, banks that now aren't paying back loans to foreign investors, and those foreign investors are likely you. Whatever happens, one thing is clear. If the system collapses, it is almost never the people at the top that suffer the most. If the flow of money slows or stops, it is the people at the bottom that suffer the most. And at the bottom is us. But also keep in mind that it is us that feeds the system in the first place with our paychecks and our pension funds, which means that with our daily choices, we have the power to choose who we entrust our money with. And it could be just one of the normal big banks, or it could be stored in a better place. Sure, the global financial system sometimes seems like a terrifying beast. But remember, without us, this beast would quickly starve. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider joining our newsletter of 65,000 people plus that are enjoying extra financial information written in beautifully written stories. Also, if you got value out of this video, please consider subscribing and sharing this information. Also, we have a private membership teaching people on their journey to financial freedom. Link below for that. And I will see you in the next.